Joining us right now via telephone is our friend, Dr. Christopher Malloy. He is a professor at University of Dallas. Good morning to you, Dr. Malloy.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Praise be to God. We're glad for your time today. We had you on in the past about your book, False Mercy, Recent Heresies Distorting Catholic Truth, which is published by Sophia Institute. You can find them online at sophiainstitute.com. But we thought it'd be interesting to kind of revisit this conversation and talk about some of those ancient heresies that we thought we solved, but kind of are still around. Maybe you can start with giving us a list.
Well, a lot of people are calling the new ones modernism. But I mean, there's a certain recurrence of Lutheranism, and there's also a Gnosticism, Gnosticism of the body, really, what's going on with the transgender movement, and the denial of the true essence of marriage. That's really a very much a Gnostic thing. There's, I don't think we even really pay much attention, but there are many people who are kind of denying the divinity of Christ, but that's not making the headlines these days, even in the traditional Catholic world. But the evolution of dogma or the non-existence of church authority, saying essentially, well, church teaching, it doesn't really matter. That it was dogma 100 years ago, or 200, or 500, or 10, 2000, close to 2000. We can change it if we want to attune the message of Christ to the needs of the day. In fact, Irenaeus in the Against Heresies talks about the Gnostics, who said essentially, well, Jesus adjusted his message to the hearers. And not in a good sense, but in the sense of he included false words, false messages, and so did his followers. And Irenaeus' response, that is not the act of a physician, but of a poisoner.
Dr. Malloy, you mentioned modernism just a moment ago, and St. Pope Pius X mentioned said this on modernism. He said it's a synthesis of all heresies. Is there a difference between modernism today and heresies that were in the past?
Yeah, well, I'd say also there's a difference between the modernism that he dealt with and that we're dealing with. But one of the big things, this is interesting. So the modernism he dealt with were secretive people in the church. So they're Catholics, and they're operating secretively and undermining the faith from within. In the past, most heretics kind of announced themselves as such severe critics of the church that very quickly they were excommunicated or identified as enemies, very quickly. So, and then he said the danger of modernism, this is the late 19th, early 20th century, was that these were actually people with decent moral lives and were secretive. What we have now, it's very interesting, is we have Catholics that are openly against certain teachings of the faith, and so they're not secretive, but they're remaining Catholic. That's kind of interesting. And they're not, many of them are not being condemned or corrected. And oftentimes the truth is not even battling back. So if you have, a rock star priest who's celebrating, unnatural sexual activities, he's not corrected. Well, by very few prelates is he corrected. And so then the Catholic world is confused. To me, this is the biggest thing. People are very confused. They think, wait a minute, do I have to accept what this, rock star priest is saying, or this errant bishop is saying, etc.? This is why we're, I think, really in a unique situation.
Absolutely, Dr. Malloy. I think that's very true. I think that's more than ever why we need to be deep in tradition. But one thing that I was thinking of while you're saying about these different heresies, old heresies popping up, is the Albigensian heresy, or the Cathars, and they existed prior to the Albigensian heresy, of course. Just like you mentioned, all these new things are old, all things. But the the Albigensian heresy specifically, I find it very interesting because their relationship between the body and the soul and the denial of the body. It was also interesting to compare that to the transgender movement, the gender ideology movement, the racial movement, all these things trying to remove ourselves, try to say we're just our souls, but then at the same time saying we're just our bodies. And they're kind of inconsistent. Whereas at least the old heresies, they may be wrong, but they were often mostly consistent, and even like you mentioned a second ago, they lived very upright lives. A lot of the Albigensians were horrible people who killed others, but a lot of them were so austere, and that's what attracted a lot of the lay faithful to follow them. Could you talk about a little bit of that relationship?
Yeah, well, what's interesting, we want to know, like, where did these heresies come from? They may well have been imported from the East because of the Crusades. So some of the soldiers coming back, and they find this, so-and-so's living a way that is high and exalted and noble, and we want to follow it. That could be tempting, especially if, prelates, your average, monk at the abbey is really lax and is not that inspiring. I think people could relate to that today. Many priests, many prelates, theologians, Catholic leaders in this or that program, parish program, are, not super inspiring. And so if people are searching, they might look at something very serious, such as this transgender movement or probably more wokefulness in general, concern for the poor. That turns into kind of revolutionary communist riots, that are fomenting now and again a little bit here in America, especially 2 years ago. But let's talk body and soul. The Gnostics also themselves were confused, and that is probably the ancient root of the Albigensian. Many, we don't know what happened in the intervening years before the Crusades, but it's a very Gnostic-type movement. So one interesting thing about them is they both they severed the connection of my deeds done in the body, as St. Paul says, from my eternal fate. And they reacted to that separation in two ways. Some of them said the body has nothing to do with heaven, stop living according to the body. So you might say, as you said, a severe asceticism. The others said, well, it doesn't matter if I utilize the body for my earthly pleasure, because it doesn't have anything to do with me. It's just kind of an extrinsic instrument of my soul. So, John Paul II, with his theology of the body, he anticipated that going on today. He said we're using our bodies as instruments of pleasure instead of signs, that they're part of ourselves, signs of the love of God.
Hold that thought. Go ahead. You can finish your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe. Let me add one thing about the Albigensians in particular, denial of the sacraments. If the body isn't, part of the divine life, then the sacraments have no role or no efficacy. Mm-hmm. So they forbade marriage, and they did not practice the Catholic sacraments. Well, we have the California version of that today with, I'm spiritual.
Right.
I'm Buddhist Catholic, I'm this or that. So, but that's not the way to be healed by the Word made flesh.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
It was interesting because I have a great love for the Dominican friars, and I was reading the restoration of the Dominican order in the 19th century. And they were talking about how the Dominicans became lax in the 19th century, and this was causing great problems with their ability to convert sinners. And it's interesting because at their founding, they were very austere, more so than even the Albigensians were, and they affirmed the sacraments. But even then, they were still failing to succeed in their conversion. And it was by the rosary given by Our Lady, which meditated upon the life of Christ, that banished this heresy. So do you think that this kind of result of meditation on the life of Christ, specifically through the rosary, would be a useful tool of evangelization and preaching in today's world?
Oh, my gosh, absolutely. In fact, just yesterday, I heard a great homily saying when we are, as individuals, frustrated, we're not making it past this or that sin, this or that fault, we don't have hope that we're, things can improve for us. He said it's a sign that we need humility and trust in God. Mm-hmm. I think it's obvious when we look at the situation today, we need humility and trust in God. Let me talk about the consecration, too, and the whole Fatima promise for a second. A lot of us have been, maybe some of the good listeners are above this, but a lot of us have been piling on and saying, when is the consecration going to take place? When is it going to take place? Well, Mary didn't just ask for the Pope and the bishops to do this. She also asked us to pick up our rosary and to change our lives. That's part of my requests, as she says in the plural. So it's so clear we need God. We're not getting out of this situation ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's going to take an act of God. And from the hierarchy, I believe, but we're at the Red Sea. Pharaoh's coming at us with his chariots, as you're talking about the arrest of that fine man, and totally unjust. People get the sense that, persecutions are here in a soft way in the U.S. It might get harder. Who knows? But it's difficult to be a Catholic in a confused age, and we've got to pray.
Amen.
And the rosary is, I think, they take everything away from you. You still have your 10 fingers.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because
pray the rosary.
When the FBI had busted it, or they didn't bust his door down, they pounded on his door until he opened it. And he begged them to go easy, but they didn't. And he asked his wife to go get his sweatshirt and his rosary. And as she turned to go get that, they hauled him off to the car. And because that was, Mark is, I've known Mark since 2007. He's the real deal, and the rosary is a vital part of his life. They pray it every day. And it is a key. It is a tool that Our Lady has given to us to fight these heresies. But a couple of things you said I want to chime in on from the last segment. One, these heretics these days, these modernists, they no longer go off and start their own church. They just stay in this one. Go. If you want to embrace all of these insane, heretical, morally evil, bad things that will destroy grace in your soul and you'll end up in hell, well, fine, go. There's plenty of churches, denominations, flavors out there that will embrace all the insanity you desire. Why not just go to do those? And why stay here? They stay to corrupt the body. Then the other thing I would say is, because I've been so caught up in my friend's situation over the weekend, that a lot of trolls have come out, and I'm still kind of taken back by how proud people are to proclaim their atheism, their war against God, their hatred for all things good. What I mean? I even though I've been doing this for a long time, and I should know better, I feel like just like a naive child sometimes when I discover these people and go, how do you live like this? It seems so bizarre to me.
They're catching us off guard, but I don't know. So growing up in the 80s, suburbia, life was kind of undramatic and boring. We would kind of thump our way to someone's front porch, sit on the stoop, and then thump our way to some other front porch. I talk about this in that book. Mm-hmm. And then, but the thing is, life is actually serious, and it has high stakes. But these heretics, what they don't want, it's kind of like Wisdom, chapter 2 and 3, when we talk about the evil thoughts, the thoughts of the evil. They do not want your witness to the truth. Right. So they have to get rid of us. Yeah. I think that's why they have to get rid of the church. Mm-hmm. They don't want they don't want a pluralistic situation. That was nice for a little while.
Right.
And meanwhile, until they get the upper hand, when they get the upper hand, then they're going to try to undermine the church. Any message of truth.
Yeah.
They are going to try to undermine.
Look what they've been doing to this lady in Italy, Giorgia Malloy. Now, I don't know anything about this lady, really. I'm not involved in Italian politics. But here's how she was described this morning. She is an anti-abortion, pro-traditional family, anti-Islamic ideology, against Christian persecution, and anti-gender ideology, as well as a fan of Tolkien. And she's
What's not to like?
What's not? I mean, exactly. What's not to like? But memes were showing up with her, Hitler, and Mussolini as being equal. I mean, she is considered far right. Now, it boggles the mind still to this day. Socialism, Nazi socialism, Nazi fascism are both not on the right. They are on the left of the scale. I don't understand. It just boggles my mind, but they do it every time. So they're reinventing truth and the facts to suit their political ideology. And it seems like they're playing for keeps. The heresies today feel like they're playing for keeps. Do you get that sense?
Yes, I do. Like and that may also be panic. They are they're terrified that game's over with them, their generation. Now, if I can prop them up a little bit with hope, you look around and you see a lot of young theologians, a number of them, many of them are great. They're inspired by, kind of the renewal of the Catholic faith that you had going for a good number of decades. But some of them are out to, read Vatican II as the, interruption of the dead past, the resuscitation of the truth from this dead past, and certainly hermeneutic of radical discontinuity. And they are looking forward to Vatican V.
Yikes, that's scary.
As they understand it, right? As they understand how it will be, with all the change of the faith, and the Synod Way in Germany is an example of that kind of thing. But I think there's actually a lot of energy behind them. I look at our numbers and I say, I don't know what's going on with our numbers. That's why I say get back to the rosary and pray.
Yeah.
Get to know your faith. I'm just thinking from the theological angle, but for the person in the pew, well, I will say that Mass is a lot more reverent, I think, generally than it was, say, 15. Let's say 20 years ago. I do think.
Well, I think it differs. I think mileage can vary depending on location, for sure.
That's true. But people do want to get back. I mean, this Italy thing is an example of what are the political powers doing. I don't go too far into that, but what are the political powers doing to Europe such that they're perpetuating this war and driving gas prices through the roof? Is this good for the middle class? Is this good for the hardworking person in Europe? And then they're saying they're doing this because they're against Russia. Meanwhile, they're striking deals with China. So right. I mean, this does not adding up.
Now, do you think that the average lay Catholic should be knowledgeable, well aware of these ancient heresies and their modern brothers or cousins?
Yes. Here's the thing: we're fairly educated in America. I'm not saying the Europeans speak a lot of languages, but we're not simply. Many of us are not simply, just off the boat or just across the border. We've been here for a generation or two, and so we've covered our needs. We're able to feed our family. Well, that may be, again, the middle class is having a tough time. But let's say I'm able to do that, and I've got spare time. Well, my intellect should be developed proportionately to my situation in life. So I do think, the Baltimore Catechism is fantastic. It gives you the basic skeleton of the faith. We also do need kind of to read, if we're able to. You listen to the radio station right now. Get a good book on, I'm not talking about my book, some other book. Get a good book on the current heresies, on the Catholic faith that's a little bit higher level than you're used to. Read it, get informed, and then you can talk to your pastor about it. I think it's fantastic. We do need to be informed. On the other hand, if you're a worrywart and you're getting panicked about the church going to disappear, then you need to pray more. So I do think we have to keep a balance, and God's in charge.
Yeah.
So, but
You know, one of the points that I always tend to make for lay folk is, it's a bit above my pay grade what comes out of the Vatican and who does what or says what. So I'm forced to focus on my particular state in life, my particular vocation, which means I have to live in a state of grace, get myself to heaven, and because I'm a husband and father, that I'm responsible for my wife and children too. And beyond that is all cherry on top of the cake. So I better focus on my vocation first, and then we can move on from there. But I think most lay folk, unfortunately, do not educate themselves. So it's a wonderful opportunity to maybe challenge yourself a little bit. Pick up a book, do some reading, do some educating, and you might start with this book, False Mercy, Recent Heresies, Distorting Catholic Truth, which you can find at sophiainstitute.com. Dr. Christopher Malloy, thank you for your time today. God bless you, sir.
Thank you. God bless.
Have a great day. All right, that's going to do it for hour number one. If you can join us in the second hour, Tito Edwards from bigpulpit.com is going to be our guest. We're going to have the game show, prizes at stake, and I'm going to take up that conversation in the after show with Brent Haynes on my friend Mark Houck and the FBI raid. God bless you. God love you.